Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. This is the podcast where we talk about how to use presentation skills to move your listeners to take action. And I get to interview really interesting experts from around the world to help us do that, all the facets of what it takes to be a great presenter. Before we begin, I want to invite you to take my free assessment. It only takes 3 or 4 minutes, called speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And there in 3 or 4 minutes, you can see where you are rocking your presentation skills and where you might want a little bit of support. And now I'd like to welcome Shelley Golden, international stylist. Shelley, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Now, Shelley's had a really interesting background. She's being an image consultant and fashion stylist as part of her background because she's 4th generation in the fashion and clothing business. She's been a wholesale rep for women's clothing manufacturer in Chicago. As a corporate men's and women's fashion stylist and personal shopper, Shelley was one of the first stylists to organize and present Dress for Success seminars and presentations to corporations and educational institutions. She's produced fashion shows domestically and internationally, designed costumes for the theater, and she is an accomplished and trained seamstress and tailor. And Shelley, you and I have gone on and on and on about corsets and fashions. We can totally geek out about that, but I'm not going to subject you to that today. The other thing is wonderful about Shelley is this is an international podcast, and we have audiences around the world. And Shelley lived in Europe and Abu Dhabi for 15 years, which opened her eyes to the variety of ways people around the world put them together with color, fabric, and design. So Shelley Golden, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So before we get into the do's and don'ts of how to be great, your online presence, I'm going to ask you what I ask all my guests, which is, who's your dream interview? If you could interview somebody from history, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be in the audience?
Okay, when you told me that this was the question you were going to ask me, the first person that came into my mind was the first couturier. His name was Charles Frederick Worth from the mid-19th century. And he made the most beautiful gowns. So as part of my bio that you know, but for some reason didn't come out, is I'm a costume historian, and I've taught history of costume at fashion design school, and I've lectured on it, and historical costumes is kind of my pitter-patter passion. And so he designed the most exquisite gowns, and the richest women from around the world would go to Paris to have gowns made for them by Charles Frederick Worth. And when I lived in Boston, I worked at a historical society in Wellesley, and they had an amazing historical costume collection. It's Boston. It has some of the oldest clothes in the United States. And they had 2 Charles Frederick Worth gowns the details were amazing. And I would love to interview him to talk to him, to how he came up with these ornate designs, how he established the first couture house that women would come and pay him large sums of money to make exquisite gowns. And that would be my dream interview.
You could, if you read through 19th century and early 20th century literature, you hear people talking about the Worth gown, a gown by Worth. But I'm curious why you say he was the first couturier. Why not say one of the people who designed clothing for Louis XIV or Queen Elizabeth?
Because he didn't just design clothing for one or two clients. He had almost like as you would say today, like a storefront that people from anybody could walk into. It wasn't just going to the king and creating, or the queen and creating clothing for them. Anybody could walk in if they had the money to pay for the gowns. That's a different story, because it was some of the richest people in the world could afford these gowns. So that's the difference. It was the first like house of fashion that anybody could walk into.
That's amazing. That's very
different.
Cool.
Yes.
So now we are in 2020 and we're doing a whole lot of work on online presence. Let's go to the conversation we had about online presence.
Okay, let's do it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Strategic Speaking for Results. That's the Facebook page that we are broadcasting from. And I am doing an interview with one of my best buddies and someone, I am a client of hers, believe me, Shelley Golden, international stylist. Shelley, welcome.
Thank you. So glad to be here. And not only that, I'm a client of yours and you're a client of mine. It's the Mutual Admiration Society, actually.
It's great. Well, the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because we're all now doing Zoom calls all the time, or not just Zoom. I know there's Google has an online service. Microsoft has an online service. Skype. I've got one client I work with on Skype because she can't be bothered to learn the new one. She knows Skype, so she said, I'm just going to do this. And so most of us now are fairly familiar with online conversations because here we are, it's early May 2020, and we are recording this because this is going to go out on my podcast later. It's early May 2020. We're still in the middle of a shutdown. And so everything's been moving online. I do firmly believe that live meetings will come back once we figure out how to do it safely. But in the meantime, I think it's time for us to go beyond the basics. I'm a presentation skills trainer. You are a stylist. We both work with experts. And it's amazing that the mistakes that people make and the things, one of the key things you can find out is as you are speaking, make sure you know who you're talking to and how they expect you to be dressed. I don't care what you're wearing below the frame, but also if you're going to do gestures, make sure that the gestures are up here in the frame. So you're not doing this sort of thing where your hands flicker in there. And remember that you're talking, if you're doing a speech that's a sales speech or an enrollment speech, pretend you're talking to your best friend, even if they're not necessarily on the call. But Shelley, you're going to tell us all the rest about enhancing your online presence. So please, how can we do this? And you can use me as a guinea pig as you want, because I am your client and you have helped me.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's really important, first of all, that you know that you are living, as I call it, in the box.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever people see in the box is all they see. They don't necessarily see all your body gestures, but the first thing that they notice, first of all, is the lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Is the lighting, is it, like right now I am sitting in front of a window, but it's coming in on my right side. I ideally would have preferred a little bit more light coming on my left side to balance out the lighting on my face. But I changed positions for this interview with you, Elizabeth. So the first thing is the lighting. So you want your face to be lit up. You want people to be able to see you.
Yes.
You don't want to have lighting come from the back. You don't want to be backlit.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to have one side of your face completely flooded with light and the other side completely dark. Ideally, if you do have external lights, you would want them at 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So that they're not directly in your eyes. You don't have little reflection in your eyes, or if you wear glasses, you don't have the reflection in your glasses. So that's really
hard. Yes. Yeah.
It is challenging.
Yeah. Here's actually, I'll just add a point is remember, we're seeing what the camera sees. So looking at us, if I would look at you live, my eye and brain would compensate for things. I would say, oh, that's Shelley, that's what it is. But the camera only picks up what the camera picks up. So if you have a light behind you, the camera is not going to show, it's going to pick up the light behind you, not your face. And that's something that people forget, I think. We get so used to conversations back and forth that we forget it's actually, we have to pay attention to what the camera is going to pick up.
The camera actually only picks up light and dark.
Yeah.
And the light, whatever's white light, comes forward. Mm-hmm. Whatever is dark recedes. So that's why the lighting is the first thing that people see. So even just, for example, sitting in my box here, you see this white flower more prominently than you see the other flowers because it is whiter. Right. It's not that it's bigger. It's not that it has more. It's just the fact that it's lighter, whiter, and that's what the camera sees. So after you're looking at the lighting, the second thing you really want to look at is your camera angle. I'm on Zoom so often, and I see so many people that are sitting with their head at the bottom of the box, and it's almost like you're talking to a floating head at that point. So it's really, really important that your camera angle, that the camera is eye level or a tiny bit higher than eye level, so that you don't get the droopy-eyed, the droopy dog look looking down to your camera. So if the camera were a little bit higher than your eyes, or is a little bit higher, then it forces you to open your eyes up to look up to the camera, which is this way, the person who's talking to you, that the other people on this Zoom, WebEx, Skype session can actually feel like you're talking to them.
This is actually something you have to practice too, because right now I have a separate camera above the level of the laptop. I'm looking at you down here, but if I look up here, it looks like I'm looking right at you. And that can be, if you have the camera too far separated from the screen where you're seeing the other person, that's when you see this sort of thing.
Right. And you don't really want to see the top of people's heads. The minute you see the top of somebody's head, you know that the camera is actually too high. And for some women, you don't really want, especially in the time of COVID, you can't get to the salon to get your hair colored. So maybe some people don't necessarily want the tops of their heads being shown. Yes. There's also the grocery store and fast temporary hair dyes. So that
I've thought of it. I've thought of it. Yeah.
So, but the camera angle is the next thing. So lighting, camera angle, and then the one of the most important things that I talk to so many people about, because I'm doing a lot of Zoom makeovers for people, is what is your background? What does it look like in the box? When you're talking to somebody in a in-person meeting, you are in the room, whatever the room is wherever you happen to be meeting, whether it's a coffee shop or it's an office or a conference room, that's just the room. Here, chances are you're at home or you're in an exterior office. But what people see in the box, it tells them so much about you.
Yeah.
And do you live in are you a Slav? Do you have a very simple setting? Do you have a very ornate setting? are you unkempt? You know, and the reality is that people have, before life on Zoom occurred, and people had in-person meetings with you, they had a certain level of respect for you. They had a confidence, a level of respect for you, and had a visual of how they would meet with you. And now you're inviting them into your home. Whether you want to invite them into your home or you don't, you are inviting them into your home. And granted, not everybody's home even has a nice corner. Sometimes people have too many kids and they're in the kitchen and there's people running around and pets running around. This is the reality. So of course, there are virtual backgrounds, and there's the real background.
Can you talk for a little bit, because you've got a real background. I'm in front of a virtual background. Let's talk a little bit about the difference and how to plan for that.
Okay, so let's talk about virtual backgrounds. I'm not a virtual background expert, but there are different ways to obtain virtual backgrounds. If you're on Zoom, Zoom has some pre-established virtual backgrounds that you can just click on. I'm not going to get into how to do that. But the reality is, if you don't have a green screen, you will come in and out of the virtual background. Your hair will grow, your hair will flatten. If you have, so I have a cup of tea. If I were just chatting with Elizabeth, I would normally, not feel like inhibited to have a cup of tea. But if I'm in a virtual background without a green screen, that cup might go in and out of view. So it's a little distracting. So it's actually the distraction in the background that makes all the difference. So Elizabeth has a virtual background, but she has a green screen. So it almost sets the background. So if you move Elizabeth,
yes,
you're not going to have woozy parts. Her hair's not going to go in and out. Her shoulders aren't going to go in and out. So that's one of the differences with virtual backgrounds. So additionally, with virtual backgrounds, you can upload your own visual.
Yes.
You can take a picture, you can download it from the web, and then upload it. So whether you want you can even take a picture of a nice office, and that's your background, or a nice living room, or a view out, a mountain view, whatever works for you.
And here's another thing to think is that if you are, say, a guest expert on somebody else's show, like today, I have Shelley doing this. Yeah. We're giving you a little peek behind the scenes of how to go beyond the basics with your video calls. Is part of why I wanted to have her. I knew she'd have a real background, and I wanted to show you a branded one to give you an idea about that. I had someone on my team who does graphics, and she did 5 or 6 different versions of what was going to show up best. This is right now the background for the podcast, because this is going to become a podcast episode. If I am a guest on someone else's show, for instance, Monday night, I'm being an interview webinar series in Munich is having me on. I'm going to have something that's branded with my actual business name, Speakers Who Get Results. Strategic Speaking for Results. It's all about results. Instead of the one for the podcast. So that's also a choice to decide how you're going to do that. And you can bet I consulted with Shelley about what to wear against this background.
Right. So in terms of what to wear, it's very strategic in terms of what your background is. Of course, my basic rule of thumb in terms of clothing is don't wear busy prints. Don't wear stripes, don't wear busy prints. Because if you are only in the box, and chances are people only see you from the armpits up, there's only a small amount of what you're wearing showing. And chances are that is taking up 1/4 to 1/3 of the entire screen in the box. So if you have a stripe or you have a busy print, that you don't want somebody's eyes to have to figure out, oh, is that disturbing? Is that a circular print, a zigzag print? You don't want them to have to zero in on your print unless it's a very small print. But my suggestion is to wear solid colors.
Does that apply to backgrounds as well in terms of busy backgrounds?
No, because people sometimes are in offices, there's bookshelves.
Oh, yes, it does. Sorry, I'm
Right.
going to say, don't say no, say
Right.
yes. Please, go ahead.
So, oh, you mean if you're wearing solid colors with a busier background?
In the choice of your background, you don't want it to be so busy that people can't see you.
Well, right. So
If
when
you can.
when I'm working with people and they do have a busier background, I try to make it less busy. I try to make it optically aligned and optically pleasing. So if people do have bookshelves behind them, it's best to have all the books either one direction or the other. So have all the books vertically. You don't want to have some vertically, you shove in some books or some magazines or newspapers and some other little things. You want it to be vertical so that it's easier on your eye. Get rid of all the junk, too many family photographs in a round frame and a square frame. Again, it's too much for the eye to deal with. So if you do have family photos and you want to keep them, make sure all the frames are more or less the same shape. Same with the artwork on your wall. If you're in an office, I was working with a woman the other day, and we were trying to create the illusion, a nice background, and she was bringing in various paintings to put on her wall, and she had a modern painting with a black frame over here, which was very nice. And so we didn't want to have a gilded frame or some a completely different feel. So we wanted to keep all the same feeling so that it's easier on the eye. There's more symmetry. And when you're looking at something that's symmetrical, it's easier on the eye.
I would also add to that, if you're going to use one of the artificial backgrounds, because maybe you've got a wall behind you, you can project it on or whatever. Please don't do any of the ones with the rolling waves or the cosmos, rolling palm trees and so forth. It's fun if you're doing a fun chat with a friend, but there are often people who for me, it gives me eye trouble. My eyes are always trying to focus on that. That's all I can look at. I can't look at the face of the person I'm talking to. And it actually makes my eyes hurt after a while.
Right.
Here's a thought. I know you do Zoom makeovers for men as well.
Yeah.
Does this all apply to men? Are the rules or roles different?
No, the rules are the same. I don't see any difference. The only difference is men aren't going to enhance their look with makeup. That's all. I would still stick with solid colors. In terms of the color, I just want to go back to the color for a moment.
Yeah.
So one of the things that if looking at Elizabeth and myself, so we have, there's symmetry in both of our visuals, and we have contrast in both of our boxes, in our visuals. We have symmetry in the fact that we have something to our left and something to our right, and they're at slightly different heights. So it creates a little bit of a line of perspective. So Elizabeth has the microphone in front of her, and the visual of the speakers who gets results over on either side of her. So there you have a balance, and it's easier on the eye. In terms of coloring, in terms of colored clothing, so Elizabeth is standing out from her background. So she has blue and white in the background, but she has a dark jacket with a pop of color with her scarf. And the white top, even if I know that personally, I know that it's not white, but it appears white because the camera only picks up light and dark.
Right.
So it appears white, which pulls out this and matches the white in the speakers who gets results wording.
I was surprised when you told me that the pale pink shirt I had was reading as white, and that yellow would read as white as well.
Yeah. Yes. Right. So if you're wearing an off-white, you're wearing a pale pink, you're wearing a pale blue, or sometimes I'm talking to people, they have like mint green walls. I'm like, it looks white.
Yeah.
If it's so like, because the camera only picks up the light and the dark. There are nuances, but so even so myself, because I'm in this kind of gray and white background here, to stand out from it, I'm wearing red, but I also wear a lot of bright colors. I actually wear a lot of black and white, which would not work on this background.
So half the clothes in your closet are gathering dust because you're on Zoom all the time, right?
Like 3/4 of my closet, to be honest.
Yeah. I was looking this morning at the things. I said, these are all things that are meant to be worn when people can see all of me, and it's the same blue sweater that's coming out every day. Yeah.
Right. I'm wearing is life on Zoom. I'm wearing the same few things because 3/4 of my wardrobe is black and white, and even my boyfriend, when I told him that I'm not wearing black and white, he was like, wow, that's, so much of your wardrobe.
Well, good for him that he noticed. Yes.
Yes. Well, when you walk into my closet, it's very black and white.
So we've talked about light. We've talked about background. Mm-hmm. What else do we need to know to really enhance, to go beyond the basics for your online presence?
So to go beyond the basics, it's really, it's your posture. Mm-hmm. It's how you sit. It's how you appear in the box. So you ergonomically want to be sitting at a right angle for the most part, if not sitting back a tiny bit. What we get into trouble is people are leaning like this, or they're leaning over their computers looking down. And then so many people are having neck problems. A chiropractor that I know said she has more young people coming in than ever before because they're all techies doing this.
With their headbands, yes.
With the head back. So it's really, really important if you need to invest in an external light, if you need to invest in a camera, put your computer on some boxes, some books. So buy an external keyboard and mouse so that you can sit comfortably, that your spine is in the correct alignment. So additionally, in terms of placing your body inside the box, you want your head to be in the upper third of the screen. And if you could show your hand on the top of your head, then you have enough space on top of your head. You don't want to have your head at the top, and you don't want to have your head all the way at the bottom. You really want to be able to sit up and have a distance on top of your head that it really looks like you're talking to somebody. When you're talking to somebody and both of your eyes are at the same level, it's easier. It's more intimate. You feel like you're actually engaged in a conversation right there with the person.
You can find out this if you watch the news shows and the commentators, because everybody's commenting from home these days.
Yes.
And I found that since we've all been talking online and on web calls, I'm paying a lot of attention to the backgrounds that people are, the way the commentators are doing things. And there's one commentator who's regularly on a show that my family watches about dinner time, who's talking from his kitchen, but it's clean. It's very clean, but he's talking from his kitchen. And I thought, I wonder if there is no other spot in his house where he could get privacy when he's making policy statements from the kitchen.
These are things nobody knows.
Well, this is a thing to notice when you're watching TV. Next time you're watching a news show, just pay attention to where the commentators are and how they have set themselves up to frame it.
Right. So in addition to looking noticing where they are and how they are set up. There's two more things. One, I have noticed, being in the fashion and clothing business, that most of the people on television, the news commentators, the presenters, are wearing solid colors.
Yes.
And they are wearing colors. They are not wearing black, and they are not wearing white. They are wearing solid colors. The women usually, like if you look on the news, they have colored clothing. You know, pick a color of the rainbow. You don't usually see somebody wearing just black, and certainly not white. So that's one thing. And secondly, if for men who do wear ties, when you're being photographed, or shirts or ties, you don't want it. Sometimes there's an effect that happens. It's called a moire effect, which you get like this wavy effect. When the pattern it's a small repeating pattern. It could be a stripe. It could be another, just a geometric
small repeating pattern. Yes.
Right. The camera can't identify the pixels. It has to do with the pixels. And if the camera can't identify the pixels, you sometimes get this wavy effect. That's why a lot of people on television are being photographed have solid colors, or they have a big broad stripe tie. Not that people are necessarily going to always wear a tie on Zoom or on WebEx or Skype, but just kind of giving you the idea that sometimes small patterns can have a moire effect. That's why it's just easier to wear solid colors.
So when is it, for the men, when is it appropriate to wear a suit with tie or without tie? And when is it appropriate to wear a shirt? And when is it appropriate to wear a t-shirt?
Okay. First of all, 100% of that depends on where you live, who you're speaking with, period.
Thank you. Yes. Rule number one of presentation skills is who's listening?
Who are you speaking to?
Yes.
Where, and having Elizabeth and I have both lived in Europe, we've lived in the United States, so we kind of get the international flavor and the way people dress, the way people look at you. And if you're wearing a suit, it really depends where you are, who you are, what you do, who your audience is. This is something that you need to figure out yourself. In terms of whether you wear a tie or not, again, it's the same thing. I happen to live right now in my life. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Elizabeth has lived here, has lived here for a long time, on and off. And it's extremely casual. So I actually have a client who's a German client, a man, and he came to me because he didn't understand how to dress for business casual in New York, LA, and San Francisco, because all three of those business casuals are very different.
Exactly. Very different expectations. Yes.
And he didn't understand the nuance of how to present himself in those three climates, in those three business climates. So there are nuances, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody who needs a little bit of help. But it depends where you are and who your audience is.
I would say that I would guess that rule one is make sure you're at least well-groomed.
Yes. Yes. You definitely want to be well-groomed. You also don't want your hair sticking up. A little bit of hair oil sometimes helps that, because sometimes if you have, depending upon your lighting, your light will pick up strands of hair.
Yes.
You want to be well-groomed. Even if you're growing a beard, guys, it's okay. But you don't want it to be super straggly. You want to make sure you don't have any food around your mouth. Women, make sure if you do put makeup on that it's not smeared.
Talk to us about contour.
Okay, let's talk about contour. Okay,
Shelley gave me a lesson on this. She told me that I was doing makeup for the street, not the camera.
Right. So this is a two-dimensional screen. And just like an artist painting a painting, When I lived in Europe, I really studied the Dutch masters in European painting. And so when you're painting a painting on a two-dimensional surface, you have to create the illusion of three-dimensionality. So again, the camera picks up light and dark. You basically have a flat face. For women who do wear makeup, not all women wear makeup. If you do wear some makeup, you want to create the illusion of some cheekbones. You want to create the illusion that you do have a difference between your chin, the tip of your chin here, underneath your chin and your neck. And so the only way to create this is with dark and light. So to create higher cheekbones, you want to put a little line, like almost draw, like, as I would say,
under your cheekbone. Yes.
Take some bronzer and highlight in a sickle pattern. Go around your cheekbone up to your hairline, and that will create. As long as you don't put any blush here, the camera picks up the light, so that brings my cheekbone forward. And what's underneath is dark and will recede. So it looks like I have cheekbones, even though I don't have any cheekbones. And same for your chin. Or if you have jowls, you wanna make a variation, the difference between your chin. So you literally would want to create a line, create the illusion that this is your chin line and this is darker underneath. Again, you would not walk out onto the street like this. It's just for the camera. It's also a way to create a longer neck. Like one of my little tricks actually is if you put your collar up in the back and down in the front, what it's doing is it's creating a vertical line from here to here. So it's vertical lines, it's slimming down my neck. Whereas if I put the collar down, I mean, I already have a long neck. So,
I'm trying this now, yes, to see if that makes it better. Right.
I think that's a shawl collar, if I'm not mistaken.
I have a shawl collar. Yes, I have a shawl collar. The dark blue is a shawl collar, and the white is. I just actually showed you. I told you I'd be your guinea pig. So the white already has a V neck.
Right. But if you put it, especially for those people who don't have long necks, or who have fat necks, broader necks, that fleshier necks, if you put it up in the back and down in the front, again, you have a vertical line, and this way your eyes look up and down and not from side to side.
And the idea is to get your eyes to the face of the person you're talking to.
Right. So the whole thing is the focal point. So what you want to do for the face, kind of zooming in a little bit more now on the face, you want people to look at you just as if you're talking to them, look into my eyes. So you want to focus in on the eyes. So if you're taking and creating a frame, you need eyebrows, or if you have glasses, that would suffice. So sometimes you want to make sure that people can see your eyebrows. Maybe for women, you could pencil them in. Guys, you have what you have. And also for the bottom part of your frame are your lips. So you would want to put a little bit darker lipstick on. Again, the camera picks up light and dark. So it doesn't always matter the exact color. It just matters how light and dark it is. As a color consultant, I am very particular about what color you wear, but not everybody has the right colors. Do you want to go out and buy them? Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but if ideally you want to try to pick up the color in your clothing or your background. It's easier for the eye to see just a few colors and a few shades. It's easier on the eye, as if I had this tomato red jacket on with bright fuchsia lipstick. There'd be a juxtaposition, whereas again, it's easier on the eye, so you could focus on my face. If it's the same color, then you don't really notice it as much.
What I love about Shelley is that Shelley sees colors, differences in colors that I don't. because that's her training. And I just look at that and I say, oh, that's blue and red and whatever. And she says, oh, no, it's like all different things. So I don't care on other people, but I care on me, because if there's somebody else like Shelley who has that color sense, I notice the way people talk. I notice the way people show up, things that others might not notice. So I want, if there's somebody who has an eye for color, I'm going to go to Shelley and say, I know I'm only seeing the very basics. I want you to help me with the subtleties and what's going to fit me best. This is why I work with Shelley. It is because I know this is something that I won't notice. And sometimes the colors that I love are not the ones that look the best on me. And that was a hard one.
I know. I do want to say, just in terms of like setting the stage, when I was creating this little vignette here, I had these white flowers, which seemed a little bit stark. And I knew that I would be wearing a jacket that was something of this color, since that's the other colors I have besides black. And so this particular flower, these flowers right here, I knew that it actually has a little more pink in it. And I knew that that would soften it up. And again, it reflects the same kind of pinky red that I have on, as opposed to bringing in a yellow flower. That would be adding yet another color. So it's best to stick with two colors, and then a third color is a pop color. So for example, my set is gray and white with a pop of red. Elizabeth's set is blue and white with a pop of, I'm going to call it grape, in terms of her scarf, and her hair, which is the blonde in the front. But it's blue and white. Those are your two colors. It's easier on the eye to have two colors, even if you have a neutral room or your office. It's say neutral colored, neutral browns. You basically want to stick with two colors, and a third color can be a pop. That's how the eye seems to feel most comfortable. If you have all one color, you certainly wouldn't want to wear black in a black room with everything black. Or if it's black and white, then it's so stark. But if you have a third color, it just softens it up a little bit. And so that's one of the rules that I speak to, that I advise my clients when you're dressing. Choose two colors, and the third color is your pop color.
Your accent color, something to pop up.
Color.
Shelley Golden, this has been amazing. Thank you so very much for doing this and setting yourself up so that you can be a good example to us all. It's wonderful. This has been Elizabeth Bachman, Strategic Speaking for Results. We are broadcasting this live on Facebook right now, but we will be on the Speakers Who Get Results podcast in a few weeks. If you are curious about how to find out more, you can see us in the links below the video. And if you're curious about enhancing your presentation skills, then you could go to my quiz, which is the speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where your presentation skills are great, where you're rocking it, and where maybe you might need a little bit of support. I'll see you all next week.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.